Heartwarming moment. Millionaire rushed in as little girl, 7, begged please, it's too hot, disturbing disconnect exposed. The sun blazed down like a relentless spotlight on a stage, casting shadows on the street where life pulsed quietly. Jimmy, in his crisp tailored suit, hurried home from a high-stakes meeting, his mind a racing torrent of figures and tech innovations. He was a self-made millionaire, but today he felt nothing but the oppressive weight of success. Turning a corner, he spotted a scene that shook him to his core. There, on the curb, sat a frail little girl, Sophie, her tiny frame wilting against the heat. Tears glistened on her cheeks like small drops of desperation. Please, she begged, it's too hot. I just need some water. That voice, so small yet so full of urgency, hit him like a punch to the gut. In an instant, he rushed to her side, pulling a bottle from his bag. Here you go, he said, offering it to her shaking hands. She gulped it down like it was the most precious thing in the world. As he watched, a tidal wave of guilt crashed over him. How had he built a life of privilege while turning a blind eye to suffering like this, right in his own neighborhood? Sophie's story lurked behind her tear-streaked face. Her parents, once vibrant members of the community, lost their jobs, drowning in an ocean of bills that towered like skyscrapers over their hopes. They had become shadows of themselves. Jimmy knelt beside her, and in that moment, he was flooded with memories of his own childhood, of joyous days spent at the community fair, where laughter mingled with the scent of cotton candy. But he hadn't been to the fair in years, too busy chasing dreams that now felt hollow. Just as he began to feel a stir of connection, he heard a shout in the distance. The annual community fair was just around the corner, but the excitement in the air felt different this year. As plans were laid, differences between those benefiting from the town's growth and those left behind began to create cracks in the community. Miscommunication struck. Sophie's family was left out, creating an unintentional rift. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tensions rose as people began to take sides. Jimmy felt the pressure mounting as the divide became a chasm. He knew he had a responsibility, one he had neglected for too long. As the day of the fair approached, whispers filled the air, some regarding privilege, others about apathy. In his heart, Jimmy felt the stirrings of a desire to make things right. But as he stood up at the fair, prepared to speak for Sophie's family, a shout erupted from the crowd, drowning out his voice, echoing feelings of injustice. The air thickened with uncertainty and rage, leaving everyone wondering, could the rift really be bridged this time? Jimmy's heart raced. Was this the moment for redemption, or would it deepen the cracks? The reality hung heavy in the air, leaving everyone, including him, wondering if they could ever heal as a community. In the chaotic murmur of the fair, the vibrant colors of the booths and fluttering banners felt more like a backdrop to a tragedy than a celebration. Jimmy stood frozen, his heart pounding like a drum. The energy around him was electric, filled with voices shouting, some in support, others in fierce opposition. Today was supposed to be about togetherness, but here he was, staring at a community on the brink of division. As the crowd settled momentarily, he tried to gather his thoughts. The nervous energy coursed through him, making his mind race. What could he say that would bridge the gap? He needed to address the pain, to speak for those like Sophie, who felt unseen amid the holiday cheer. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, scanning the sea of faces grimacing back at him. "Can I have your attention, please?" he shouted, his voice rising above the clamor. The tension shifted slightly, as some turned to listen, though many held tight to their grievances. "I see you all here today, and I feel the heart of this community. I also see the hurt, especially in folks like Sophie and her family. We cannot let our differences become a wall separating us. They are our neighbors, our friends. Let us remember, we're all in this together." His words poured out, searching for connection. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of agreement and disbelief. Some people nodded, while others exchanged skeptical glances. A man at the front, clearly agitated, called out, "What do you know about their struggles? You live in your fancy world, while families like hers suffer." His words landed hard, and Jimmy felt the heat of anger rising in his cheeks. The man was right. He had insulated himself in his privilege for too long, and he couldn't ignore it. But the voice of the skeptic spurred something within him. "You're right, I don't know what it's like to struggle. I've lived a life of comfort. But if I choose to ignore this, what does it say about me? About us?" He saw Sophie holding her mother's hand, watching him with wide eyes, her little face searching for hope. He couldn't crumble under the weight of the moment. "I want to change that. It's time we start working together. Building bridges instead of barriers. Let us not just celebrate today, let us commit to making our community stronger and more inclusive for everyone." A soft wave of whispers followed, a hesitant shift in the atmosphere. Some people began to clap, slowly at first, but it built together with the heartbeat of a community yearning for connection. It was a small spark, but sparks could ignite fires. Yet amidst the newfound hope, the doubts lingered. Could forgiveness win out against the bitterness that had taken root? As the clapping began to fade, the crowd settled into an uneasy silence again. Jimmy felt a surge of determination. He knew in his heart that this was just the start. He had to meet with Sophie and her family, to hear their stories, and to advocate for change. But then his phone buzzed relentlessly in his pocket, pulling him momentarily from the moment. He could feel dread wash over him. It was a reminder of the board meeting decision looming, one that could tip the scales even further. What if they decided to push forward with a project that would displace families like Sophie's? His choice was clear, but the weight was heavy. Could he stand up against his own world? Would he risk everything he'd built to give a voice to those who needed it most? As uncertainty settled deep within him, the crowd whispered among themselves. The choice was quickly becoming clearer, and the stakes were rising. But before he could find the answer, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, eyes blazing with fury, his business partner, ready to confront him about that very decision. "Jimmy! We need to talk!" The interruption rang out, woven with tension. Every eye shifted to them, waiting. Would he step back into the safety of his old life, or stride forward into uncharted territory? The moment hung between them, pregnant with possibilities. The air felt thick with tension as Jimmy turned to face his business partner, Mark. Mark's hands were clenched tightly at his sides, and his jaw was set in a hard line. There was no mistaking the anger in his eyes. "Outside." "Now," Mark demanded, his voice low but urgent. The crowd watched, a collective breath held in anticipation. Jimmy glanced back at Sophie and her mother, two anxious faces among the throng. He couldn't just abandon the moment. But standing his ground here meant ignoring the storm brewing inside him. "We can't just leave the conversation hanging," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Mark's expression hardened. "This is bigger than you blabbing to a crowd. You're risking everything we've worked for. We need to discuss the project before it goes any further." The last few words hit Jimmy like a brick. He felt torn, caught between the promises he made to Sophie, her family, and the world that had always preferred profitability over empathy. "Jimmy," Mark pressed, an edge creeping into his tone. "This isn't just some local fair. We're talking about investments, projects that will determine our future. You can't let emotions from one speech change everything." The weight of responsibility darkened Jimmy's thoughts. In that moment, he realized that Mark wasn't willing to see the beauty in his effort to connect. To them, Sophie and her family were just numbers. He could hear the voices of the crowd starting to murmur again, their eyes darting back and forth between Jimmy and Mark, uncertain about what would happen next. But then he remembered Sophie's little face, the flicker of hope in her eyes as he spoke. He thought of the struggles she and her mother faced. He could do more than stand among a crowd. He could fight for them. "I can't just walk away," Jimmy finally said, his voice firm. "This is our community. If I can't choose it over a business deal, then what have I become?" Mark's face contorted in disbelief. You're being naive. You think they'll change everything for you. Maybe they will, Jimmy shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. Maybe change begins here. With us. He stepped closer to Mark, trying to remain calm even as adrenaline coursed through him. People deserve a voice. What if we brought them to the table? What if we listened? Mark's eyes darkened, full of resentment and disbelief. You're involved in a fairy tale, and it will have consequences you can't even begin to understand. The murmurs from the crowd swelled, and Jimmy could feel their growing hope. He caught sight of Sophie once more, their eyes meeting briefly, and in that moment, something shifted within him. Perhaps it was time to challenge the status quo. Fine. But I'll talk to them, Mark conceded begrudgingly, his voice dripping with skepticism. The crowd erupted in hushed whispers, some beginning to cheer, others still uncertain. As they both stepped away from the scene, Jimmy could hear chatter about what he'd just proposed. One voice rose above the rest, stating, "We need a chance to be heard." Someone else, with quiet excitement, reassured, maybe it could work. But before he could bask in the flicker of hope, Mark leaned in closer, whispering, "You step out from this, and I won't follow. You'll lose everything." The threat hung in the air, heavy and daunting. Would Jimmy abandon the fight, or could he foster the change he yearned for? As they walked away from the crowd, Jimmy's resolve deepened. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Sophie, her mom, and the countless others who felt voiceless. Would he go back, or would he let the weight of his choices dictate the course of lives, including Sophie's? The fair blazed behind him, a final image in his mind as doubts circled. Determined yet frightened, he took a deep breath, nature's sounds blurring around him. What would he do next? The answer felt momentous, like the spark before a wildfire. And as he turned reluctantly towards Mark, he had to wonder, was he ready to face the potential consequences? Jimmy knew he had to make a choice. His heart beat fast as he glanced at the fading fair, where laughter and chatter mixed with an urgent need for change. He could still feel Sophie's gaze behind him, a small beacon of hope shining through all the uncertainty. "Listen, Mark," Jimmy said, voice steady despite the storm inside, "these people are not just numbers. They have stories, dreams. We can bring them into this. We don't have to do this alone." Mark scoffed, shaking his head. "You're living in a dream. What difference does it make? Their voices can't change the reality we're facing." As they walked further away from the crowd's buzz, Mark's words dripped with frustration. But Jimmy had felt the weight of something more as he stood there. Was it hope? Courage? Or fear of losing something that could matter more than just profit margins? "What if I put together a meeting?" Jimmy suggested, surprising himself. "What if we gather the community and hear their ideas? Maybe we can all benefit." A frown etched itself deeper on Mark's face, his hands balling into fists. "You have no idea what you're asking. They want to see the bigger picture. And if it goes south, you'll be standing alone with this pipe dream." The edge of doubt crept in again, but Jimmy squashed it. "I'll take that chance. I'd rather try and fail than ignore them entirely." Just then, over their conversation, a voice broke through. It was Sophie, her small frame emerging from the crowd like a ray of sunshine cutting through clouds. "Are you two talking about us?" she asked, her eyes wide and filled with hope. Jimmy knelt to meet her at eye level. "We're thinking of how we can include everyone in the conversation. We want to hear what you all need." Her face brightened, a tangible warmth in that moment. "Really? You mean it? Like a real meeting?" "Yes," he assured her, feeling his heart soften as he looked into her innocent eyes, reflecting a world of infinite possibilities. Mark shuffled awkwardly, his defiance warping into something more complicated with Sophie's wide, pleading gaze. "You shouldn't be involved in adult matters," he said, but it fell flat, the words reluctant. "I can help!" Sophie exclaimed, determination rolling off her. "I know things about the park and what we need. Please, just let us talk." Jimmy felt an urge to grab Mark's arm, that old partnership feeling strained and unfamiliar next to the unspoiled hope of a child. "See? This is what I'm talking about. They want to be heard. They deserve it. Mark sighed, glancing between the crowd still buzzing and the bright innocence in Sophie's eyes. This isn't just a small chat. We have investors, plans, I don't care. Sophie shouted unexpectedly, her little fists raised. There was a fierceness in her voice that cut like glass. It's too hot. We have to do something. For a moment, the world around them faded. Jimmy felt the truth in those words. This wasn't about just business, it was about lives, dreams, and above all, making things better for people like Sophie. Mark looked at her, astonishment battling disbelief. Slowly, his resolve seemed to soften. What do you want to say? Sophie took a deep breath, steadying herself. We want a safe place to play. A park without weeds, nice swings, and space for our picnic. We can tell you guys what we want if you will listen. It was simple. Pure. And so achingly real that Jimmy felt hope flood back, glowing warm against the doubt that the little girl with the big dreams had spoken what was always there but pushed aside. All right, Mark finally relented, though his tone was still skeptical. Let us give them that chance. But I'm not going to hold back for you or anyone else, Jimmy. You have to be ready for the fallout. Thank you, Sophie squeaked, bouncing on her toes, her smile lighting up the tension. Jimmy watched her and felt a mix of relief and apprehension, knowing they were stepping into uncharted territory. But the path ahead seemed to shimmer with new energy, opening doors he'd never known needed unlocking. As they began to walk back toward the thrumming heart of the fair, a new thought struck Jimmy. How would they translate this initial spark into real change? Could they rally others and forge a united front? Suddenly, a loud shout came from behind them. Help! Someone! Please help! The blood drained from Jimmy's face as they turned. His heart sank. Who was calling out? What trouble had just surfaced in the midst of this fragile hope? In an instant, the vibrant laughter around the fair faded, replaced with a sharp pang of urgency. Jimmy's mind raced as he followed the sound of that desperate cry. Panic surged through him, twisting his stomach into knots. He didn't even think twice. Instinct kicked in, and he was off, running toward the commotion. Sophie's small hand slipped into his, and he barely felt the warmth of her grip against the chill of fear creeping in. What's happening? She asked breathlessly, and Jimmy could only shake his head, unable to form words, his focus locked on the throbbing mass of bodies ahead. They reached a small crowd gathering around a booth adorned with colorful balloons. In the center, a boy lay on the ground, tears streaming down his face. He fell from the slide. Someone shouted, panic spilling into their voices as his friends hovered anxious and helpless. Jimmy knelt by the boy, a rush of adrenaline powering his thoughts. Hey, can you hear me? He said gently. The boy's face crumpled, clearly in pain. What's your name? Ethan, he managed to whimper through clenched teeth. Jimmy could see that his leg was at an awkward angle. He felt the weight of Sophie's worry beside him, her small body tense as she tried to peer over his shoulder. Okay, Ethan. We're going to get you help, Jimmy said, keeping his voice steady. Can you move your toes for me? Ethan focused and tried, but a wince of pain was his only answer. Jimmy felt the knot in his stomach pull tighter. All right, we need to get someone here from first aid, he called out to the crowd, his mind racing. He locked eyes with Mark, who was just behind him now, looking uncharacteristically alarmed. Call 911! Mark shouted, his tones suddenly urgent, snapping into action. Get a medic! Sophie squeezed Jimmy's hand, her face pale but resolute. We can help too, right? We can hold his hand until they come, she said, her voice trembling with muted strength. There was a fire in her eyes, serious and brave, and it was all the encouragement Jimmy needed. Right, Sophie, Jimmy nodded, amazed by her courage. Let us keep him calm. Ethan, you're not alone, okay? I've got you. Sophie knelt beside Jimmy, her petite form taking on a comforting presence. You're going to be okay. Just breathe, she said softly, her little voice a soothing balm amid the chaos. Ethan nodded, his gaze shifting between the two of them, the fear slowly melting away under their unwavering assurance. The minutes felt like hours as they waited for help to arrive. Jimmy watched Sophie reach gently for Ethan's hand, her small fingers wrapping around his, offering warmth that crossed the chasm set by fear. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. Jimmy felt a swell of gratitude, an inner warmth spreading as he witnessed that compassion could rise amidst turmoil. Finally, the medics arrived, responding quickly as they assessed the situation. They set to work, and Jimmy breathed a sigh of relief mingled with awe. Sophie remained steadfast, offering a soft smile to Ethan as he blinked back grateful tears. As the medics lifted him onto a stretcher, Ethan whispered to Jimmy, "Thank you." The two shared a moment that felt larger than despair, larger than fear, woven with invisible threads of kindness and connection. Once Ethan was safely in the care of the professionals, the commotion began to settle, leaving behind a fragmented peace. Yet even in that quiet, a new question loomed for Jimmy. How could they build that same spirit of empathy in the community meeting they were about to hold? Unbeknownst to him, the clarity he'd found in chaos opened a door he hadn't anticipated. Could this act of solidarity be the catalyst that transformed their gathering into something truly meaningful? Just as relief began to wash over him, another shout pierced the air, drawing his attention back. "You don't understand. They've taken her." Panic bubbled anew, and before he could think, Jimmy was already pushing his way back into the bustling crowd. What in the world was happening now? The crowd's chatter swelled again as Jimmy pushed closer, urgency quickening his pulse. His eyes darted from face to face, searching for the source of the commotion. Sophie kept pace beside him, her small feet barely keeping up, but determination lit her features. "What's going on?" she whispered, her voice shaky with confusion. A woman stepped forward, her chest heaving, face white as a sheet. "My daughter! She was by the carousel, and now she's gone." Her hands clutched at her hair, and her eyes darted around wildly. Jimmy felt his heart sink at the desperation of her words. "Which way?" he asked, already assessing his next move. He could feel Sophie's grip tighten around his hand, reinforcing the bond of bravery that had formed moments ago, now rendered even more critical. "Over there!" the woman exclaimed, pointing toward the bright lights of the carousel, the music now a distant memory drowned in panic. "She was just here, I swear." Jimmy didn't hesitate. "Stay here, Sophie. I'll look for her. Call for help." He didn't wait for her response. Instead, he sprinted toward the carousel, his breath coming in sharp bursts. He couldn't let that little girl's name vanish in the frantic crowd like a whisper lost in the wind. Please don't let anything happen to her, he thought, desperation swirling in his gut. They had to find her. As he weaved between the throngs of people, Jimmy's mind raced. How could a child just disappear? The fair was supposed to be a place of joy, not fear. Chills ran down his spine at the thought of what could be happening. He rounded the corner and scanned the area near the ride. The jangling bells of the carousel seemed a mocking soundtrack in the midst of his anxiety. "Is anyone missing a girl?" he shouted, his voice merging with the din of laughter and chatter around him, but it felt hollow. No one responded. Then something caught his eye, a flash of bright pink fabric at the edge of the crowd. There she was. A little girl, playing with a balloon, blissfully unaware of the chaos her absence was causing. Relief washed over him, mixing with an almost overwhelming sense of anger. How could she be so carefree while her mother was panicking less than 50 feet away? "Hey!" Jimmy called out, rushing toward her. "You need to come with me." The girl looked up, eyes wide, as if just realizing the world around her. She hesitated, her face shifting from delight to confusion. "Why?" His heart sank. "Your mom is worried about you. You can't be here alone." Then he saw her look past him, her little hand pointing. "But I wanted to ride that." Before he could respond, a voice broke through the clouds of panicked thoughts. "Maddie!" The mother's voice, filled with both fear and relief, cut through to him, and he turned to see her racing towards them. As they reached one another, the little girl launched herself into the mother's arms, and Jimmy felt a knot uncoil in his chest. The mother's tears flowed as she hugged her child tightly, words spilling forth in a jumble of relief and reprimands. "I thought I lost you," she cried, holding Maddie to her chest like a precious treasure. But as the scene unfolded, Jimmy couldn't shake the feeling that their crisis was far from over. There were whispers now rippling through the crowd, each new voice laced with escalating anxiety. "Someone went missing again," someone said near the edge of the group. "What is happening?" Jimmy asked, but he was met with blank stares. A chill ran down his spine, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his shoulders. What was this fair turning into? Was there a darker thread weaving through their day of joy? Just as new worries formed, another voice rose above the noise. "We need to leave. It's not safe here." Jimmy's pulse quickened as panic threatened to spill over again. He had to get everyone to safety. "Sophie!" He shouted for his sister, hoping she hadn't wandered off in this chaos. He began to push through the crowd, dread gripping him as he sought her out. Could this day of laughter turn into their darkest hour? The crowd began to scatter, a tide of panic pushing Jimmy forward. He felt a rising tide of anxiety as he continued shouting Sophie's name, searching relentlessly through faces etched in fear and confusion. His heart raced, echoing the frantic rhythm around him. "Where are you, Sophie?" he murmured under his breath, fighting back the urgency spiraling within him. Every step felt heavier as reality loomed like a dark cloud above them. Then, through the chaos, he spotted a familiar figure. Sophie was standing at the edge of a food stall, her big eyes locked onto a display of colorful cotton candy, oblivious to the worry unfolding around her. "Sophie!" he exclaimed, relief flooding through him. She turned at the sound of his voice, a smile breaking across her face, but it quickly faded when she noticed the worried look on Jimmy's. "Jimmy! Look! It's so pretty!" she exclaimed, pointing at the fluffy treats. "No time for cotton candy, Sophie." He rushed to her side, kneeling down to meet her gaze. "We need to get out of here. People are missing. It's not safe." Sophie's brow furrowed, confusion mingling with the excitement she'd felt moments before. "But I want to ride the Ferris wheel. Please? Later, I promise." He pulled her into an embrace, grounding herself in the warmth of his protectiveness. "Right now you need to trust me. We have to go." As they made their way back, a tight knot of worry gripped Jimmy's heart. He glanced at the other families hurrying to escape. Every parent's face mirrored his own. This fair, once such a beacon of joy, now felt like a sinister game. When they reached an open area, they encountered a group of frantic parents clustering near the entrance. There was a young mother gripping her husband's arm while searching for someone, the terror swirling in her eyes. The man shifted restlessly, discussing in clipped breaths what they should do. Jimmy felt the weight of their fear, the ache of helplessness growing in his chest. He and Sophie watched as the voices rose, blending into a cacophony of worry. It was a sound he hadn't heard there before, one that felt alien in the realm of laughter and festivity. "Do you want to get ice cream instead?" he asked Sophie, attempting to break through the storm of uncertainty swirling around them. "Okay," she said hesitantly, her trust resting in his protective hand. But just as they turned to leave, an authoritative voice cut through the panic. "Everyone, please remain calm." A man in a security uniform stepped up, his expression stern yet reassuring. "We're investigating a few reports. Please stay in this area until we announce safety protocols. Do not leave the fairgrounds." The crowd was uneasy, whispers of unease washing over them. Jimmy clenched Sophie's hand tighter. "What does that mean? Stay here? We can't do that." Sophie looked up at him, her small face filled with concern. "What if they can't find them?" "I don't know," he replied softly, trying to shield her from the growing tension. "But we have to be brave, right?" Just then, a shriek pierced the air, not far from where they stood. It was a sound of raw panic, sending a ripple of horror throughout the crowd. "Help!" a voice cried, and Jimmy's heart plummeted. "Stay close to me, Sophie," he urged, turning toward the source of the screams. Every instinct screamed at him to protect her. What had been intended as a joyous escape was morphing rapidly into a nightmare. As Jimmy forced himself forward, the sensation of dread clung to his gut. What else could go wrong? Before he could process the chaos, another chilling thought struck him. What if this was just the beginning? The crowd surged around Jimmy as he moved toward the source of the cry, an urgency pulsing through his veins like a drumbeat. The air was thick with anxiety, the scent of fried food and spilled soda mixing in an acrid cloud that made his stomach churn. He held Sophie's small hand tightly, her fingers warm and reassuring in his grasp, yet he couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that clawed at him. "Stay close," he whispered. "No matter what." They squeezed through anxious clusters of bodies, each face a mask of panic. The shriek had been followed by murmurs, some frantic, some helpless. Jimmy's heart raced as he tried to decipher where to go. The screams echoed in his mind, a visceral reminder of what was at stake. As they rounded the corner, he spotted a little girl in a pink dress crumpled on the ground, her pigtails flopping limply by her sides. Around her, a small crowd had formed. A father was kneeling beside her, frantically trying to assess the situation, his hands trembling. "Can you hear me, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice cracking with a mix of desperation and fear. "What happened?" Jimmy asked, instinctively stepping closer. The man's eyes darted over to Jimmy. "She collapsed, it's too hot. She needs water." His words were clipped, urgency straining them thin. Without hesitation, Jimmy broke away from Sophie for a moment. "Wait here, okay? I'll be right back." He needed to help. He couldn't just stand by. He dashed toward a nearby concession stand that was still operating, ignoring the fear rattling in his chest. "2 waters, please," he called out, pressing money into the vendor's hand. He didn't wait for the change. Turning back to the scene, he rushed back to the girl, breathing out a sigh of relief to see her father still beside her, gently brushing damp hair from her forehead. "Here," Jimmy said, offering one of the bottles. "She needs this." The father took the bottle, his hands shaking as he unscrewed the cap and poured a little water into his palm, gently bringing it to the girl's lips. "Just a little sip, sweetie." Sophie stood a few feet away, her brows knitted in concern, but the moment had captivated her. She watched wide-eyed as the girl slowly blinked and took the water, her breasts shallow, eyes glassy. "Is she going to be okay?" Sophie broke the silence, her voice small and hopeful. "I think so," Jimmy replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. The girl began to sit up, her eyes slowly gaining focus. Relief washed over Jimmy, but it was short-lived. The chaos around them and subsided, voices were still rising, many still gripped by panic. As the girl started to regain her strength, Jimmy's thoughts darted to the many that were still missing. The feeling of urgency began to swell again. "We need to keep moving, Sophie," he urged, turning back to her. "There could still be others who need our help." Before he could step away, a voice called out from the crowd. "Over here! We need help over here!" Jimmy's heart sank once more. Faces were still frantic, some strangers waving to him. The weight of this fair, once a paradise of joy, now pressed down like a heavy burden. He felt torn. There was a part of him that wanted to protect Sophie, to shelter her from the chaos surrounding them, but another part that urged him to act, to not turn away from those in need. "What do you think we should do?" he asked Sophie, kneeling to meet her gaze. "We can go back, or we can see what they need." Sophie looked at the chaos, then back at her brother. Her small face showed a rare determination. "I think we should help." In that moment, he realized how brave she truly was. As they took a step forward together, the urgency gripping Jimmy deepened, a feeling that told him their decisions in the next few moments could make all the difference. As they walked toward the calls for help, Jimmy couldn't help but wonder, what if reaching out meant facing his own worst fears? What awaited them beyond those cries? Jimmy pushed through the frenzied crowd, adrenaline fueling each step as he and Sophie navigated past the concerned faces. The calls for help grew louder, mingled with cries of confusion. Every voice seemed to pull at his heartstrings, urging him forward. He felt a mix of fear and determination building inside him. They finally reached a small group gathered around a food stand, where a woman was kneeling on the pavement. She clutched a faintly stirring toddler, who lay limp across her lap, tears streaking down her face. The children nearby, their faces smeared with cotton candy remnants, were hesitant, unsure of what was happening. Sophie squeezed Jimmy's hand tighter. "What if they need us?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "They do," Jimmy replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. He knelt beside the woman, who looked up with wide, pleading eyes. "Please," she gasped, desperation mingling with the heat. "I don't think he's breathing right. I don't know what to do." Jimmy's heart hammered in his chest. The child looked so small, so fragile. "Okay," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "Let us try to get him some air, all right?" He gently gestured for the mother to lift the child a little higher. "Let us get him off the hot ground, and maybe take him to the shade over there." He pointed toward a nearby tree, its branches swaying lightly in the warm breeze. As the mother shifted and held her son close to her chest, Jimmy could see the little boy's face. His cheeks were flushed, his eyes barely open, but there was life in him. It was faint, but it was there. "Just breathe slowly," Jimmy said, doing his best to mask his own rising panic. "Can you help me get him to that tree?" Sophie looked up at him, her innocence still bright despite the chaos surrounding them. "I'll hold his hand, okay? I can help," she declared, rushing forward, a small beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness. The mother nodded gratefully, tears spilling as she tightened her hold on her son. thank you so much," she whispered. With careful steps, they moved toward the shade. Sophie grasped the little boy's tiny hand in hers, and something inside Jimmy shifted. It was a reminder of innocence, of strength. They reached the tree, and Jimmy felt the air cool slightly under its branches. "Keep talking to him," he said to the mother as he scavenged through his backpack for supplies. He always carried a small first aid kit, habitually prepared for anything that might arise during family outings. "He needs to hear your voice." The woman nodded, her voice shaky yet strong as she began singing softly to her son. The melody mixed beautifully with the nervous chatter of the crowd around them. It was a reminder of what they were all fighting for, a return to safety. To Joy.as the boy came into the shade, Jimmy gently dabbed his forehead with a damp cloth. He never expected to see something so heart-wrenching today. Sophie's small fingers squeezed tighter around the boy's, and Jimmy marveled at how one small act of kindness could ripple out and create hope. In another moment, the boy blinked, his eyelids fluttering. He seemed to register Sophie's presence, squeezing her hand ever so slightly. "Sophie," he rasped, almost a whisper. "Hey! You're going to be okay." She smiled, her innocence pouring out as she reassured him. "We're here to help. Everything's fine." But as Jimmy settled into the moment, a shout pierced through the lovingly formed bubble they created. "There's someone down by the Ferris wheel. It looks bad." The chilling shout sent ice coursing through Jimmy's veins. He exchanged glances with Sophie and the boy's mother. There was no more time to hesitate. "Stay with him," he told the mother, his voice firm. "He has you, and we're going to get help." With a nod and a hopeful glance back at Sophie, Jimmy took off toward the sound of panic, his mind racing. What would he find down by the Ferris wheel? Would he be able to stand firm again? As he dashed into the throng, he couldn't shake the thought, how much more would it take before they found peace? And did courage run deep enough in him to face whatever was coming next? The Ferris laughter faded into a distant memory. The vibrant colors twist and fade into a blur of chaos as Jimmy tore through the crowd, his heart hammering in his chest. Thoughts raced, every heartbeat echoing the cries for help. The Ferris wheel loomed ahead, bright against the shadows of uncertainty, and anxiety clawed at his gut with every step. "Please, let it be okay." The words rattled in his mind like a prayer as he pushed through panicked families and unease thick in the air, slicing through frivolity. Finally, he reached the base of the Ferris wheel, where a cluster of people was gathered. A little boy lay at the foot of the ride, his friends huddled nearby, faces pale with fear. "What happened?" Jimmy shouted, rushing to kneel beside the boy. I think he fell, a girl with tear-streaked cheeks whispered, her wide eyes brimming with panic. Everyone, back up! Jimmy urged, trying to project calm amid the chaos. He quickly assessed the situation as the boy groaned, clutching his ankle. Pain radiated from his face, and Jimmy fought against the rising tide of dread. Hey, buddy, I'm here with you. Can you tell me your name? Jason, it hurts, the boy whimpered, tears streaming down his cheeks. Okay, Jason. We're going to get you help, but I need you to breathe with me. Can you do that? Jimmy steadied himself as adrenaline surged through him. He recognized that he had to be more than just a bystander, he was here to lead. Sophie's small figure broke through the crowd, approaching with a determined look. I want to help, she called, her innocent face bright against the swirling panic. No, Sophie, stay back, Jimmy began, but she was already beside him, holding Jason's hand tightly. I can help him. Just like before. We need to keep him calm, she said, her voice steady. For a moment, everything else faded. There was a spark, a thread of compassion woven among the chaos, a moment tethered to hope. All right, Sophie. Let us do this together, Jimmy smiled, and together they encouraged Jason to focus on their voices. You're going to be all right. Help is on the way, he assured, his resolve hardening. As moments passed like hours, Jimmy's confidence began to solidify. Each gentle interaction between Sophie and Jason brought a sense of connection. Laughter from the fair seemed to fade further, leaving a singular focus on the child in need. Then, through the receding clamor, they heard its sirens in the distance. Help was coming. Relief washed over him, but it was soon followed by the real challenge. Could they help not only Jason, but the entire community? Once the paramedics arrived, they took over, expertly assessing Jason's injury. As Jimmy stepped back, his shoulders finally relaxed. He turned to see Sophie with tear-filled eyes, but this time they were from both empathy and purpose. Did we help him, Jimmy? She asked, her little voice quaking. We did, he replied with a glowing smile. You were amazing. The paramedics whisked Jason away, but not without sending grateful glances back. The shadow of fear still lingered in the air, but in that moment they had forged a bond of hope. And through the haze of anxiety drifting around them, Jimmy felt a new purpose igniting within him. He needed to gather everyone, even those who had doubted, to find a way through this chaos. I know this day has been hard, he called out, coming to stand on a small platform nearby, surveying the faces of the crowd slowly assembling around him. Fear was still present, but now they were united, a community watching over one another. It's time to pull together, he shouted, determination in every syllable. This is our chance to change our fate. We need to listen to each other, to learn from experiences like Jason's, and ensure safety for everyone. Together, we can build a community that fosters support and understanding. Let us set a meeting right here, right now. We can stop the fear and begin rebuilding. A murmur surged through the crowd, a mixture of uncertainty and cautious hope. Disconnected families began to look at each other, expressions shifting. It was as if darkness had lifted, revealing the heart of a community yearning to heal. Hands reached out, voices began to uplift, and Sophie stood beside him, a small pillar of strength. Will you help us? Jimmy echoed towards the crowd, empowered by the child's belief. Heads nodded slowly at first, but soon, cheers began to rise, excitement exchanging fears for determination. With Sophie by his side, their voices melded into a chorus, uniting them with a vision that stretched beyond the remnants of pain. Together they would redefine their narrative. The fair might have turned chaotic, but it had also opened eyes, broadened possibilities, and ushered in a wave of community spirit. Tears flowed freely now, tears of relief, of rebirth, and of the realization that every story, even the most painful ones, could lead to a brighter tomorrow. And as the fair's laughter returned, this time it resonated with a sense of purpose, a newfound heartbeat, optimistic and invigorated. This is the moment that stood as a testament. In challenging times, unity could shine brighter than success by itself. So when the last remnants of worry floated away, they stood as a family, a community ready to rise together, ready to listen, and ready to change the world. If you felt the power of this transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss the next exclusive stories coming your way. Leave a like now, to feed the algorithm with joy. Comment your reactions and feelings about this inspiring ending below. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation, because don't wait not even one more second to spread hope to those around you. True fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.